there's a misleading illusion that the vegan movement is growing because more and more grocery stores have packaged products on the store shelf. Packaged products are not a powerful indicator of interest or the political vitality, social relevance, meaning, and impetus of the movement. Paul Bashir is one of the single most successful people in vegan activism in the last 5 years. But look at his YouTube channel, and he's not even half as successful as I am, and I define myself not as a measure of success, but as a measure of failure. So let's get real. Here's the YouTube channel for the Save Movement. The Save Movement is probably the most respected and the most positively covered in the mainstream press of all of these examples. They get, magazines and newspapers writing about them. Look at the YouTube channel, okay? I can get more views than that if I just upload another video complaining that young people are lazy and should quit playing video games. If anything, what this indicates to me is that the statistic we started with from Google Corporation, the trending data showing a 50% decrease from a peak in early 2017, we're now at 50%, the level of interest. That looks like a conservative estimate. There is a dynamic relationship between the level of interest, what Google measures in these statistics, and then what you can do with organizing that interest to go out and accomplish things in terms of lobbying, activism, events in the real world. Let me make my bias clear within the first 5 seconds of this video. I am myself vegan. I am myself an aspiring vegan activist. I've been coming here on YouTube for years to sound the warning bell, to sound the alarm when something is going wrong in the vegan movement, because I want the vegan movement in general to succeed. I want to succeed myself. It's really easy to take an attitude of shooting the messenger. The last time I made a video talking about this phenomenon, 100% negative response. But guess what? There are hard statistics that back up my perspective on this matter. This is Google trend data showing you that interest in veganism is not growing. Now I'm going to come back to this chart. You're going to see it zoomed in up close. We're going to talk about this in some detail, so don't worry. You don't have to pause the video now. You don't have to rewind. For those of you in the audience who are inclined to disregard this chart, for those of you in the audience who are highly motivated to dismiss all of this data because it's bad news you don't want to hear, because it's a canary in a coal mine, whatever allegory you want to use, keep in mind how you would respond to this same chart, this same data, if it were showing the exact opposite trend. If I were showing you this same chart from the same source, I could even take this and just flip it backwards. And I said to you, hey, interest in veganism is going up and up. Interest in veganism within 2 years had doubled. You wouldn't be so skeptical, would you? You'd say, oh, wow, that's great. We have this solid evidence, social science research on the internet showing us that interest in veganism is going up and up, that the vegan movement is doing better and better. Okay? My formal education is in political science, very much including the use of social science statistics, the way we learn about trends and public interest, approval and disapproval on political issues in political science. It's been a big part of my life, in the university, even in the professional sphere, even in my private life, I gotta say. Okay, I understand how these things work. The type of data you get from Google Corporation here, okay, it really is valuable. It really is much more valuable than what we relied on in, say, the 1970s. Like in the 1970s, they'd literally phone up a bunch of people at around dinner time and ask them, how racist are they? Okay, like, oh, hey, is the man of the house home? We have a few questions for you. This is a polling center. Then you'd ask them some questions about how racist they are, okay? Do you think that really accurately reflects how racist people are compared to the precision we have in measuring their viewing habits on YouTube? If you really crunch the numbers with YouTube, you can tell how many people in the American public are concerned about illegal immigration from Mexico, how many are concerned about this issue, how many are concerned about that issue, and you can put them in proportion to one another. You say, okay, the type of person who's concerned about illegal immigration from Mexico, the statistics show, just by looking at YouTube viewing habits, those same people are even more concerned about the trade deal with China, or maybe it shows they're less concerned, but you'll have numbers with that kind of precision. Old-fashioned political science polling data was much weaker than this. So I'd urge you, it's good to be skeptical, but if you really understand the numbers and the type of data you're looking at here, it's really very powerful what we now have to work with compared to what we used to rely on in political science data. The type of social science data we get from YouTube, we get from Google Corporation, it's really powerful, it's really meaningful, don't ignore it. If it were telling you the exact opposite, if it were telling you that the level of interest in veganism were doubling and not dropping in half, you wouldn't ignore it. So don't ignore it now when it's the canary in the coal mine, when it's the warning you need to hear, when it's the warning we all need to hear to get organized, get motivated, and turn this movement around. Compared to the peak in early 2017, interest in veganism is now about 50% of what it once was. And if that seems implausible to you, if you're skeptical, keep in mind you can't have a best-selling book every year. Some years, veganism has a huge breakthrough on a mainstream TV show like the Oprah Winfrey Show. Oprah Winfrey did the vegan challenge with her and her entire staff, and exposes millions of people to this idea, this diet, the ecology, the ethics for the first time. Can't happen every year. It cannot happen every year. If growth in the vegan movement is going to be sustained by having a best-selling book year after year after year, then that growth is not sustainable. Recognize that. Yes, it's good to be skeptical, but it's not reasonable to look at a couple of years where you had a few hit books, hit movies, famous, recognizable faces on mainstream television talking about veganism, and think, oh, it's just going to keep growing and growing like this forever. Okay? Not even Star Wars can sustain that. Not even Batman can sustain that. They can't have a hit Star Wars movie every year. But even if you did, the social, political, and ethical impact would be less and less with each new movie, with each new book that comes out. And that's even true of Star Wars. Okay? The 1977 Star Wars film had a huge impact on the culture. And you know what? I'm sure the first time veganism got discussed on the Oprah Winfrey Show, huge impact on the culture. For millions of people, the first time they saw slaughterhouse footage, the first time they saw a documentary about ecology and veganism, or about the ethics of animals treated, huge impact, okay? But now that is over. It's a short-term effect on the culture. This is the YouTube channel of Paul Bashir, and these are really important to look at as indications. Paul Bashir is the respectable face of Anonymous for the Voiceless. I personally am not a fan of this organization, but they are one of the most famous, the most influential, the most discussed in newspapers vegan organizations in the world. Okay? So in the last 3 years, this has been an enormously successful organization, and it has partly been enormously successful because of the dynamic link between their street activism and what they put on YouTube. Okay, so this is not an example of a failure. This is an example of one of the most successful vegan organizations of the time. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. Look at the number of viewers on that channel. It's nothing. It's practically zero. Okay? That is a sign. That is a canary in a coal mine. There's something wrong here. What we call success in vegan activism is shockingly similar to failure. You don't believe me? Here's the total number of views per month Paul Bashir gets, and you get a little bit of a chart there showing you that, it's kind of normal, a little bit of a decline. 34,000. There's the total number of views I get. I consider myself a failure. I consider my channel on YouTube a failure. I consider my attempts at vegan activism thus far to be a complete failure. And yet I'm vastly more successful than Paul Bashir on YouTube. And Paul Bashir is the only YouTube channel for Anonymous of the Voiceless. Look on the right-hand side of the screen there. They've reserved basically a blank channel with the name Anonymous of the Voiceless. But the Paul Bashir channel is the YouTube channel for that organization. Anonymous of the Voiceless, okay? What is success and what is failure in this movement? There's a real warning here that we should not disregard. Direct action everywhere. Okay? It's difficult to say who has had more coverage in the mainstream media in the last couple of years, Anonymous for the Voiceless or Direct Action Everywhere. Okay? They have both had a ton of discussion on television, radio, newspapers. Okay? During this period of time, they've had an avalanche of mainstream press coverage. They've had controversy, conflict, court cases, and they have had a lot of money. Look at the number of views they have on YouTube. All right? Many of you will say, oh, well, YouTube isn't real life. Whether we're talking about Paul Bashir, Anonymous for the Voiceless, or Direct Action Everywhere. Oh, well, YouTube doesn't really measure the number of people involved. Really? You think so? Okay, I'm going to talk about this on a small scale. I'm going to talk about this on a large scale. This is a really misleading misconception for two reasons. On a small scale, think about how many participants are involved in Paul Bashir's videos. Think about how many participants are involved in Direct Action Everywhere's videos. People who were there, people who attended the event, people who said, hey, that's me in that video. And by the way, these are kind of professionally edited. They're not like my videos. A lot more human hands, a lot more volunteers or participants are involved in putting these videos together. You get a slick packaged product with professional editing, and sometimes there were more than 100 people involved as participants in making this video. Okay? If you have 100 people involved with making a video, and they're all proud, hey, I was at that protest, or I was at that event, I was a participant, I'm in that video. You know what you have? You have more than 100 grandparents, more than 100 boyfriends and girlfriends, more than 100 aunts and uncles whom you share that video with, or who find that video, who see that and say, there's my cousin Andrew, and he's in that video. There's my friend from high school, Sarah, and she's in that video with Direct Action Everywhere. The fact that these have so many participants and so few viewers shows a crippling lack of interest. You see what I mean? The low level of public interest, its significance is exacerbated. It's made worse when you consider how many people are positively participating, how many people are involved. Has to be seen in that context. So that's on the small scale. On the large scale, if you want to disregard this, how do you think today the record industry works? When they're looking for a new rapper, for a new vocalist, a new recording artist, you think they don't look at what numbers they do on YouTube? YouTube has some of the most solid numbers in the game. Numbers on Twitter can be very misleading. Numbers on Facebook can be misleading. These are hard numbers on YouTube. They really are. And they're directly connected to advertising revenue and everything else. You think a record executive isn't going to take the time to look and say, oh, well, this person claims that they've been playing sold out shows. Like, let's say you have a recording artist and say, hey, in the last 6 months, I did 10 gigs, and every single one of those gigs had more than 1,000 people at them. Okay, that's what you say, but you know what I think? I think, looking at your numbers on YouTube, I think the people who were attending those gigs, the people who were attending your concerts, they were there to see some other artist. They were there for some other reason. They were just there because it was Thursday night is half-price beer at that venue. Those are successful venues or successful shows due to other artists. Because when I look at your YouTube numbers, then I know how many people are really interested in you. How many people are interested in hearing your voice, right? If you got thousands of people showing up to events, whether they're concerts, lectures, protests, and then you have practically zero views on YouTube, all right? It's a very important, very meaningful indicator. It's a much more powerful indicator than old-fashioned polling data we used to use in political science, calling people up on the phone, interrupting them in the middle of their meal at dinner, and trying to ask them a bunch of political questions they don't want to answer. What this measures, whether it's the trend data from Google Corporation or the views on YouTube, it measures interest. And interest is the oxygen in this ecosystem. If there's no interest, how are you going to get organized to do activism? If there's no interest, how are you going to earn people's trust to give you donations to go out and start the projects you want to do? Okay? There's a misleading illusion that the vegan movement is growing because more and more grocery stores have packaged products on the store shelf. Okay? It's not true. Okay? Packaged products are not a powerful indicator of interest or the political vitality, social relevance, meaning, and impetus of the movement. These indicators show you what you really need to know, not the fact that you can buy blocks of tofu at the supermarket when 90% of the people buying tofu are meat eaters who have no interest in animal rights. All the vegan foodstuffs are consumed by non-vegans. That's the tragedy of being in Taiwan right now. In Taiwan, right now, vegan restaurants are everywhere. Vegan packaged products are everywhere. And the vegan movement is nowhere. So let's pay attention. Pay attention to the successes and the failures. Paul Bashir is one of the single most successful people in vegan activism in the last 5 years. But look at his YouTube channel, and he's not even half as successful as I am, and I define myself not as a measure of success, but as a measure of failure. So let's get real. Here's the YouTube channel for the Save Movement. The Save Movement is probably the most respected and the most positively covered in the mainstream press of all of these examples. They get, magazines and newspapers writing about them. Look at the YouTube channel, okay? I can get more views than that if I just upload another video complaining that young people are lazy and should quit playing video games. These numbers are practically zero. And these are, again, professionally edited, well-made videos, sometimes with dozens of participants, but sometimes with hundreds and hundreds of participants. Each one of those participants has grandparents, boyfriends, girlfriends, cousins that will inflate the numbers. Here's an activist you've never heard of called Roger Yates, all right? Roger Yates, the number of views on his videos, as he does tabling as a form of activism. He sets up a table with buttons and posters and booklets, and he just promotes veganism directly in a humble way. He collects donations, then he spends those donations, doing this form of activism. The number of viewers on his YouTube channel is comparable to the number of viewers you just saw for the Save Movement. So if a massively successful vegan organization with a huge level of positive promotion in the mainstream media, in the press, if that is attracting a similar level of social media interest to a tiny nobody you've never heard of who just does tabling in Ireland, this is a really serious warning. It's a red flag. It's a canary in the coal mine. Okay? How about the single most successful vegan organization of the last decade, PCRM? At first glance, you might think the numbers aren't too bad. Hey, 88,000 views per month. The numbers are terrible. My own channel, a complete failure, 83,000 views. I am just one guy, flat broke, no positive connections in the vegan movement. Nobody's helping me, fighting an uphill struggle. I'm divorced, single parent, unemployed, in a terrible situation, struggling to teach myself Chinese in Taiwan. I have every disadvantage. Apparently, I can compete with PCRM. You know what? I can compete and I can win. That's how much of a goddamn failure PCRM is. Or conversely, that's how little interest there is in their success. Again, these are successful examples, but the movement as a whole is failing. Do not confuse the success of packaged food products with the success of the movement. The movement is still a failure. Okay, it's getting repetitive, right? I could keep going all day. We're not running out of examples. But how about a counterexample? Earthling Ed is the single most successful guy in the past couple of years that I know of. 800,000 views per month. Joey Carbstrong, 282,000 views per month. If you take a moment and look at the little charts there on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see they're not really growing. I mean, they're kind of treading water, not rapid growth, in the last few months. But still, overall, successful. Overall, that's a counterexample, right? Seems like a positive case study. Bad news, guys. Freely, in August of 2016, 12.3 million views. What has she declined to now? By mid-2019, under 1 million views. It's not just her failure as one creative artist. When you're talking about 12 million people disappearing from this category, it shows that the whole ecosystem is getting smaller. The total size of the audience, the total level of general public interest is declining dramatically. Vegan Gains, a dramatic decline from 5.3 million to 1.2 million views. So my point here is, yes, you can find a small number of channels that are successful or treading water, but their success is on a tiny scale compared to the failures, like Freely and Vegan Gains. And I could go on and on and on and make a huge list. We could go through the whole list of everyone who was successful in 2016. And these declines are dramatic. So if anything, what this indicates to me is that the statistic we started with from Google Corporation, the trending data showing a 50% decrease from a peak in early 2017, we're now at 50%, the level of interest, that looks like a conservative estimate. Some of these things indicate that instead there's only 1/5 as much interest or less, that actually the level of public interest has been decimated. And guys, this whole ecosystem, this whole economy is hanging by a thread. Vegan Gains has the same number of patrons as I do. Vegan Gains relies on 158 Patreon supporters. It's mind-blowing. I have only 142, but wow, I guess I'm not doing so badly. Bite Size Vegan, big name in the game, 309 supporters. So if I manage to double the number of people supporting my channel, I would be in the big leagues with Bite Size Vegan, right? This is showing how small the big leagues really are. Those Annoying Vegans relying on only 39 supporters. Joey Carbstrong, very successful. Again, he's one of the few exceptions to the rule. Only 584. These are small numbers. But the smallest numbers of all are reserved for the people who are the most respectable, the people with PhDs. So if you think that YouTube channels that offer a combination of activism and entertainment are not indicative of what's really going on in the marketplace of ideas, guess what? The YouTube channels that are just about activism with no entertainment at all, they're doing much worse. Here's Gary Francione. Francione redefined the game in many ways. His name is synonymous with abolitionism, the abolitionist approach to vegan activism. His YouTube channel basically has 0 viewers. But even on videos with a huge number of people collaborating, with a huge level of institutional support, funding, like this legal symposium, which is doubtless in many ways the culmination of his life's work. He's a professor of law as well as a vegan activist, okay? He is getting basically 0 views, 0 public interest on that. And you can compare, so that's in a year ago that was uploaded, that video, okay? Not yet 100 views. By contrast, within 1 day, I upload a video with no links to anything of me just complaining that people ought to quit playing video games and they should read books and do political activism instead, and I get vastly more views than that. Okay, I got no special effects, I got no script, I got no plot, I got no interns. I have absolutely no support from any vegan organization anywhere in the world. And guys, this failure on social media, it is reflected when you see the number of people who show up for protests on the street. I recently made videos that were controversial but enlightening for many people, where I really looked at how few people were turning up for major events promoted by all the big organizations in Ottawa, Canada. Before preparing this video, I looked at how few people show up for vegan protests, vegan political events in Washington, D.C., USA. I didn't want this video to be an hour long, so we're leaving that out. But yes, there is a dynamic relationship between the level of interest, what Google measures in these statistics, and then what you can do with organizing that interest to go out and accomplish things in terms of lobbying, activism, events in the real world.
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.
I'm going to end this with a depressing reflection on what I would do if I had more Patreon support. When I lived in Vancouver, I wish I had the support, whether through cooperation with other vegan organizations or support from viewers here, that I could have gone out and run a pancake stand or a hot dog stand or a soup kitchen, could have had something like a vegan free food foundation. I wish we could have taken that to really impoverished parts of Canada and filmed it, where you set up, a soup kitchen, in effect, giving away free vegan food, do it on First Nations reservations, do it in, dead-end post-industrial towns like Hamilton, Ontario. Go out there and tell people and show people you have a choice. Even if you're poor, you can buy lentils instead of beef. You can improve your health. You can take ecological responsibility. You can do the right thing ethically by the animals. Go out and do a soup kitchen, giving away free food for veganism. I wish I had the support to do that. Instead, my experience when I was in Canada, Western Canada, was so negative that I decided I had to give up on vegan activism entirely. I had the money at that time. I had a very small inheritance from my father. I ended up spending all the money from my inheritance going to visit my daughter, because again, I'm divorced with a kid. But I had a small inheritance from my father, and I said to other vegan activists, look, let's do a conference at a specific topic in mind. Let's get 7 people together, each present a paper on this topic, then bind the chapters together and publish it as a book. I would have done some more academic things like that too. The number one thing I would do right now, if I had the level of support, and again, I know these people don't have that much more support than me. If I had the level of support of Bite Size Vegan, I would have an illustrator complete the illustrations for my series of children's books. I would get involved with writing children's storybooks to support the future of veganism and adapting those storybooks into cartoons. The cartoons could be here on YouTube, they could be here on Netflix. We have to get involved with cultural production to produce a new culture that is going to replace a culture of excuses, a culture of cruelty, a culture of ethical and environmental irresponsibility that has become so normal that it's completely invisible. The ultimate tragedy of what veganism aspired to do in the last 5 years, tried to do, and failed to do is that we tried to shake this culture out of its sense of unquestioning conformity to those social and cultural norms. And instead, we have ourselves become yet another invisible part of those social and cultural norms. Vegan options on airplanes have become normal. Vegan packaged food in the grocery store has become normal. The vegan diet being promoted on Oprah and NBC and mainstream television has become normal. We've become part of the easily ignored drumbeat of everyday life, the same way that people with peanut allergies and people who are lactose intolerant did. We don't want to just be a genre of restaurant. We don't want to just be another fad diet. The point is to form a movement that's going to make everyone else in this society uncomfortable, and it's ultimately going to lobby for legal change.
I guess I've kind of realized in a way that even if I can inform, 1,000 people and maybe make some people dislike me in the process, that it's worth it to me.